Hi, I'm Shay Oliver. Welcome to the Priority Paradigm. I'm sharing stories of amazing people who've made radical changes in their lives for something more important. Today, I'm joined by Barbara Hart, and she has a great story to share with us. So without further ado, Barbara, take it away.
Oh my goodness, just like that. Take it away. I'm
Just like
Barbara
that.
Hart. I was born in a small town in Maine, and Shay and I were just talking about the types of boating, and I grew up on lake boats or lakes. Boating, water skiing, fishing, small boats and canoes, and that was it. The short version is once I moved to the Portland, Maine area from Central Maine after college, I ended up meeting a gentleman who was a sailor, and he had done some ocean sailing and some sailing on the Great Lakes, and there's no question I have to tell you the actual thing that happened is on our third date, he looked me deep in the eyes and said, "I sail and all of my friends sail." And I said, "Gee, I'm sure I could learn," because I wasn't a sailor.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So we'll fast forward a number of years. We got married, we bought a house, and within the house was about a block and a half from a small yacht club on the ocean in Portland. So of course we bought a boat really quickly, much quicker than I anticipated. And I learned to sail. There's a type of sailor that, like yourself, goes out and get lessons. I'm assuming it's what you talked about, and starts with smaller boats and moves up on bigger boats. There's the type of person who learns from their spouse. Either can happen with when women learning from men or men from women. Traditionally, women of a certain age usually learn from their husbands. I am that woman. So I learned to sail a boat. I went to navigator courses because I like to be in charge of something. I like to have some control. So he sent me to a navigation course so that, and I've been a navigator for our voyage. He certainly is as good as I am, but it's a task that I've been able to take on. So I learned to sail, and we sailed our smaller boat, 26-foot boat in Maine for a number of years. Sold it to do some other things. And in 2002, for a whole lot of reasons, economy, so 3 family members had died of cancer in the prior year, plus 9/11. So there was a whole general look. We were looking at our lives and saying, okay, what are we doing? Our son's grown up. We want to be on a boat. We're in a house. We like our jobs, but here we are in this house. What's our next step? What are we aiming for? What are we doing? And in fact, we'd fixed up a house, and it was all done. We'd spent years fixing it up, and it was great, and the gardens were working, and everything was working, and I was bored. And my first thought was we should buy another house to fix up, which is what a lot of people do. And
Yeah.
He's been in the boat industry for years. At that point, he was a yacht broker, and if you're a yacht broker and you like to boat and you don't have a boat, I found out that you get one fairly quickly. So he started looking at boats because that was his job. And very quickly into looking at boats, we found this one. And this was in January of 2002. So Christmas of that year, we had no concept we were going to be living aboard a boat. January 19th, we saw this boat, put a contract on it, called a realtor, sold the house, and moved out by May 19th.
Wow.
Yeah. Bought it. I mean, we'd actually gotten a bridge loan to, take care of buying the boat while we still had the house. And we went into the bank to sign the papers, and the banker looked at everything, and she said, "You don't need the loan. You're selling the house a month before you buy the boat." And you don't need a loan here. Everything's good. I'm like, oh yeah. So many people who are dear friends and family members think it was very appropriate that we actually bought the boat on April 1st. So on April Fool's Day, we moved. We didn't actually move aboard. We moved into earlier in March. We moved into a rental property after we sold the house, and worked on the boat because you buy a boat in Maine in the winter. You do not move aboard the boat in Maine in the winter. It was up on the hard, on jack stands, not ready to go. So we spent 8 weeks getting the boat ready to go and moved aboard. That was in, as I said, May 19th of 2002, and we have lived aboard for 16 years.
Wow.
Yeah, right, that's 2000, yeah. For 16 years we've lived aboard. We have rented an apartment for one summer season once here in St. Augustine, and we've lived aboard since 2018 with the occasional visits home, the occasional visits to a hotel for some reason. But this is our life, this is our home. We sold almost everything and moved aboard the boat.
That is so cool.
Well, now The part, again, where people think that we're crazy is that one of the things we had to do was make a decision, okay, we're buying this 47-foot boat that we can certainly live aboard. My husband worked as a yacht broker, which meant he was working 7 days a week in the season. We had a house to at least maintain, even if we could fix it up anymore. And I just thought that was going to be too much. We wanted to set aside money to be able to take off sooner. So that's why we sold the house when we bought the boat. And that meant we lived, but we weren't ready to take off yet. We had to fix the boat up some more. We had to fix our finances up some more. We both were quite successful in our field, and we wanted to work some more. So we lived aboard in Maine year-round for 8 years.
Oh, so, wow.
Yeah,
so you actually didn't leave Maine?
No, a couple of trips, but yeah, no.
Yeah.
We did weekend cruises in the summer and occasional and a week vacation, and that was it. We stayed aboard the boat in Maine in the winter. And there's a whole different philosophy in that. Now we've met a lot of people, and you can find them online. We all have to be a little different. If you live aboard in the north over winter, very different than living in the cooler in San Francisco. There's a big little board crowd. But again, back in 2002, it's hard to imagine now, but the Google wasn't really. I know it's only 20 years old, but the Google wasn't as much of the Google as it is now.
No.
There weren't blogs. There were Facebook. I don't even know if Facebook existed. I certainly wasn't involved in Facebook back then. There were websites that had stories. So you could have, there were websites that they were sort of like blogs. They were trying to be online magazines. So there were some sailing things on the web that you could find of people living aboard and fixing up a boat. But it was very difficult to get information. Nowadays, it's very hard to filter all the information you can get.
Right.
All the sources. But back then, it was really hard to get information. And I can remember some of my sources of trying to find out, what do we need for the boat? What kind of boat do we need? How are we going to fix this boat up? All sorts of things. How do we live aboard in the winter? All that stuff was not available as it is now. So you learn from your neighbors. So, we moved aboard into a marina at South Portland, Maine that had 4, 5, 6 liveaboard people. And we learned from them, and we learned how to shrink wrap the boat so that the snow stayed off the deck and it kept it warmer over the winter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we learned what kind of furnace we needed to live aboard in the winter. We learned how to get water in the winter, freezing ice, thing. All sorts of stuff. And again, I'm from a small town and a family of lake boat people, if they boated at all. And so they had no concept. My favorite story early, the first year when there was a storm coming, and my sister and her husband used to sit up in central Maine and watch the weather whenever there was something coming to the area.
Sure.
And she called me and she goes, Barbara. I said, what? She goes, there's coastal flooding warnings in Portland. And I said, Pat, I live on a boat. Flooding is so not my issue. Not a thing I have to worry about in flooding.
Yeah, no doubt.
I mean, actually, it turns out sometimes there is, but at that point I was naive and young, and I didn't worry about flooding. So I had to tell her that in northeast wind, high tide, anytime there was a northeast wind over 30 knots, and it was going to happen at high tide, that's when I had an issue in that particular marina. So she would always know. Her husband was always watching it, particularly in the winter. There was going to be a northeaster, because in Maine, that's what you get, and when it was coming and how many knots of wind. And then I had to keep her informed. I have to call her every few hours and say, we're fine. So we lived aboard for 8 years in Maine and started planning on heading south and cut the cord, or cut the lines, as they say, from the dock in October of 2010, and set out on what has turned out to be, at that point, a 5-year cruise. The boat never came. Once we left Christmas Day, we sailed from Miami to Bahamas, and the boat never came back into the States until 2015.
Wow,
almost 5 years later. So in that time frame, we sailed, as I say, down the coast. I'm not sure who's going to be watching this, how much they know about boating, but in the East Coast of the United States, your options are not the same as in California or in the West Coast, where you're always outside. There's no inside to go to. Our boat is too big for most of inside, so there's no inside to go to for us. So the inland waterway is not an option for us. We sailed down from Maine in hops because of weather, stayed in Hampton, Virginia for a bit, and then a few weeks, and then sailed down to Cumberland Island, Georgia from there, just north of Florida, and then down into Florida, St. Augustine and Miami, and then over the Bahamas. We stayed in Fort Lauderdale for a while too. So we did that. And then in Christmas, as I say, went to the Bahamas. And then we had a 5-year cruise, Bahamas, Caribbean, across to the Azores, to the Canaries, back to the Caribbean, Eastern Caribbean, and then from St. Thomas over to Panama, where we stayed in mostly the San Blas Islands of Panama, snorkeled, and yeah, no, it's pretty.
Yeah.
And then in November of 2015, we left there and sailed up to Florida. So
Wow.
that's the outlines of the story. I don't know what you want to know now.
Oh, that is, congratulations. That's fantastic. It sounds like quite an awesome adventure. Actually, what I want to do is I want to take you back just a little bit to shortly after you married a sailor, so you knew you were going to learn to sail. That was kind of a given of your life. What were you doing for a living at the time? You said you had a career?
Well, my husband changed careers twice. I changed careers 4 or 5 times. But and when I met Jim Booten, we were right out of college, both of us working in public broadcasting. So I started out working in public television in Maine, and then I had I basically changed every 6 or 7 years. So I left that and when I met my husband, I was just leaving that, and I started a job in radio advertising sales. So I sold advertising and was an advertising sales manager in Portland for another 7 years or so. And I left that to start my own business, which was not successful and lasted way too long for an unsuccessful business. And then got out of that and became a recruiter, a corporate recruiter in Maine for mostly medium-sized companies as the country would look at. We only had a few very large companies in Maine anyway, or large by Maine standards. And so I recruited for small and medium-sized companies, mostly in finance, accounting, higher in jobs. And I did that for, 5 or 6 years, and left that to start out on my own. And I was I preferred working with small companies. I like helping small companies build their business. So, and again, this was back in the day. This was before monster.com. This was just starting. There was actually a company in Maine that I think it's still in existence, but it's changed a bit. And that was called jobsandme.com. And they started in Maine. I think they tried to branch out after that. But while they were building in Maine, they were just the best and a really good source and an affordable source for small companies to advertise for people. And that affordable part allowed me to be a hiring consultant for small companies and not overcharge for my services. So I would work with companies who did not have an HR manager, and I managed their entire hiring of a key person. So I didn't manage all their hires. I just would hire a key person, their CFO, their different things. And I actually started that on the boat, or as we moved aboard the boat. Everything all kind of transpired, or it was after we moved aboard the boat, and I could work from home. And I met them in their office, so I didn't have to have an office. If I needed a space, I could use, as a member of the Chamber of Commerce, I could use the Chamber's boardroom if I reserved it. And I had a very successful business from the boat in Portland, Maine for 5 years. And then we left the business. I couldn't sell it. Didn't give it enough time, and it was just basically me.
Yeah, you were the business.
I was it, yeah. And then we took off. So that's what I did for fun. I went to plays. I went on walks. I listened to music. I met my husband in a bar because we went to hear a group that we'd both known in our various different colleges. And once I met him, I learned to sail. It was not anything that was ever in my wildest dreams that I would imagine I would do this.
So was this something that your husband had wanted to do well before he met you, was live aboard?
Oh God, yes. Yeah. When I told you about the third date, when he proposed, he actually said, before you say yes, you need to know that someday I want to sell a house and move her and get a boat and go sailing. And since we didn't own a house at the time, I thought I was getting kind of shortchanged in the whole deal. But really not kidding, I cried. I was like, I really want to marry you, but and I want to really emphasize, this is a good point to emphasize, it's not like I was dragged kicking and screaming all the way. I knew there was some vague part of me that did not want the same old, same old. I didn't see a giant career path in large companies when I left college. I didn't do the college interviews that a bunch of my friends did. I didn't sea settling down, with 3.5 children and a station wagon. I got a station wagon after I got the boat because it's good for moving parts. My husband's son, not kidding.
Cool. Well, they're handy.
My husband's son moved in when he was in high school and we still had a house. And that was great and awesome and wonderful, but he was off and launched by the time we did this. So, we called him and said, the next time you come home, it's not going to be here. And where do we ship your stuff that's in the attic? Because we're out of here. So I had always wanted to do some travel and something different. And I look back now and I don't think I dreamed big enough. I don't think I was confident enough or had the vision that I wish I'd had. We meet a lot of people out here, young couples who do this for 2 or 3 years and then go back and have a real life. One of my friend's sons and his girlfriend quit their jobs, before we left Maine, so 7-8 years ago now, and went all over the world and went hiking and snorkeling and diving and all these things. They took, a 6-month trip together and came back and assumed their jobs or got new jobs and got married and have 2 children in a house now in the Boston area. But they're not ever thinking, actually they have 3 now, they're not thinking, oh my gosh, what I've done, what if I'd done this? What if I tried this? And I think they're going to be raising children who have a sense of adventure. When we got sailing out here, we met the first year, I think, 3 couples who were my age, who had cruised when they were in their early 20s, had somehow found that passion, that dream, that knowledge, or just stepped off into the unknown and went sailing. Many of them circumnavigated. And we were talking, earlier I was talking about the difference between the Google and Facebook and everything else. Well, they did this before GPS, before the ability to call home, before satellite navigation, before everything that I do not take for granted. I don't know that I would have done that. I don't think I would have stepped off the face of the earth 40 years ago and gone sailing without the kinds of things that we have now. But I have a great deal of respect for those people who did. Mm-hmm. And we met these couples who had done that, gone back, had great careers, raised families, and then when the kids were old enough, they had sold everything again and they're back at it in bigger boats. Easier because they have the refrigeration and the other things they didn't have back then, and they're out doing it. And I have to think, I wonder, what their lives, if they were less cautious in business, if they stepped out more in that time frame from when they went back to work for the 20 years than they would have if they had just done the same old. I just think stepping out sooner rather than later was a really great thing. So we did it. I was in my 50s. It's pretty good.
I think that's actually absolutely phenomenal that you did it. So talk to me a little bit about what it was like with the people around you. They knew you married a sailor and you had your sister, but were there many people who were thinking, oh dear, you've lost your mind?
Not so many as we would think. Now we'll go back to Facebook because I'm on a number of cruising Facebook groups. And a couple of people recently have been on saying, oh, my friends don't visit me. They don't want to do this. They don't support us. They think we're crazy. We never had that. I think all of my husband's friends knew him, forever and knew about his sailing. So that for them, it wasn't a big shock. They were just delighted that he found somebody crazy enough to do it with him. Our son is a sailor, but he's a racing sailor. So the concept of cruising was no fun for him. But if we wanted to do it, that was great. My family was really funny. Both my parents had passed away before we went, and one of my mom's friends said, I'm really glad you're doing this because you and Stuart want to. I'm really glad you went until your mother was gone because she would have driven me crazy with worry. And I'm like, yeah, she would have. So that's good.
A mixed bag.
Our siblings and our dearest friends are like, this is great. We love it. Very supportive. They've helped in various ways. I have some friends who are really seasick, so they don't visit us on the boat. I have another dear friend who's come and stayed for a week. And so that wasn't as horrible as I thought it would be. We've actually been pretty well supported. And maybe they're rolling their eyes and, they get concerned during storms and stuff, but we're good.
So you guys waited until the kids were gone
Yeah, the one, yeah.
Do you wish you would have gone sailing when they were younger, or when
Okay,
they
so
were still with you?
yeah, we have one, my husband's son moved in with us in high school.
Okay.
And so the whole custody thing, I mean, taking the child away was not going to happen.
Oh,
but
okay.
number two,
Yep.
but he's never been a cruising sailor, so he would not have liked it at all. I am not, neither of us are patient enough to be homeschoolers. I think again, just like the people who set off when they're 20 and try this, the people who, we've met a number of great families, people who are raising kids, people who are homeschooling successfully. Cruiser kids, I mean, you talk about if you're in your 20s and you step out and do something different. If you're raised that way, 90 some odd % of the cruising kids we've met are just delightful, smart, able to talk with anybody, interested in the environment, interested in their world, able to do things that kids their age are never going to be able to do back home. And it's brilliant and wonderful. Could I have done it? Not in a million years. There's no way I'm homeschooling anybody. So no, you have to, and I think you just have to know what your limits are. And our kid would have hated it, and I can't homeschool, so it ain't happening. I think it's great. We've met some wonderful families out there.
Oh, very cool, very cool. So when you were dating your husband, I'm sure you had a very strong sense that there was going to be a sailing component to your life.
Yeah.
Were you ever nervous about that at all, or were you more excited about it?
Abstract, like no. We have stories of me being. Well, I didn't understand heeling over. So you've been in a sailboat, so you know it heels over. And you know, he rented a boat for a week, and I didn't leave the cockpit underway for the first 5 or 6 days because we were heeling over, and I just didn't understand that. And I wouldn't take the wheel or the tiller whenever we had boats at first because I figured I was going to knock it, you know, do something to tip it over. And he kept saying, no, it's got the keel, and these were full keel, heavy boats, and he's right. I understand that now, but you know, as we're coming back from vacation, a different kind of boat lost its keel and turned over in the coast of Maine. And the people were rescuing, everybody was fine, but I was, you know, jumping up and down. You said that couldn't happen. You said that couldn't happen. Now I understand the difference. So it's, for us, it's the kind of boat you choose. But yeah, I was nervous. I'm not sure what you started in for sailboat, but I didn't really do any dinghy sailing. I did none as a kid. And I did a little tiny bit when we first met, but the boat was too small and the water was too cold. But later on, while we were living on the boat and working, he found a 17-foot boat that he got for cheap. That is just a sweet little cuddy cabin sailboat that had a jib and a main, and I just took it out almost every weekend for a few hours every day. And
nice.
That's after we bought the big boat and after we'd been sailing the big boat. But it made me a better sailor.
Right.
It made me a less fearful sailor, just to see, because they respond so quickly that I learned what to do. Even if the big boat isn't going to respond that quickly, it's still the same turn, the same thing. So I loved it. But yeah, there've been moments. We had one storm on the way down in 2010 that made me very scared. Didn't make him scared at all.
Mm-hmm.
We had a situation going from St. Thomas to Panama where we just frankly screwed up on terms of weather and route. And I wasn't scared. It was uncomfortable and inconvenient. He says that's probably the most dangerous situation we've been in, but I didn't feel any danger, so I was okay.
Wild.
Like, okay, good to know after.
So you guys have chosen a very unconventional lifestyle to live aboard and to run a business aboard. We were chatting a little before we started the video here. You were talking about money. So what's different about living aboard a boat and working than living in a house and working? Was there really that much difference between the two?
Well, okay, so I'm the only one who actually worked from the boat, or even from home. He would come home and do stuff. The first response is when you're living on the dock, again, back in the day when we moved aboard in 2002, different technology, and it was cable. The Time Warner Cable Company had hookups down the dock. which the people who were, you know, living aboard for short term didn't really care, but was really important to me. We had to be careful if there was a problem with our system. We had to make sure that the guy came wasn't the one who got seasick, because if he came on the boat, he really was pretty useless. Really not kidding. So I had a Time Warner cable guy who couldn't stand to be on a boat coming down to fix my internet hookup. It's a smaller space. It's certainly, you're not going to take any tax deduction for a dedicated office because there's no room for dedicated office. Number one.
Right.
Technology is now totally different. So technology is different. Yeah, I'm on a cell phone system right now for data, and people use satellites. People are using all sorts of things around the world to do it. This is totally different. I have 1.5 clients right now. I'm working from home, and I have a job on shore as well while we're here. And I've only had, and then I've done writing. That is, you know, so writing, when you send an article into magazines, it has to be a high resolution photos to go with the sailing magazine articles, you know, that type of thing. That was always a bit of a challenge. That has been, and I'm sure will be again, like I say, a bit of a challenge, where I can remember sitting in the cockpit in Panama with, you know, the phone up on a line on a dongle so I can get good coverage from the Panama bad phone system and upload very laboriously one photo after another to Google Box, so that the editor can go up to Google and get them. So the Dropbox. So it's that kind of thing. There are some jobs you can't take because they are insisting on hardwired or security situations.
Sure.
But there are other people younger than I who are much more technically astute, who have contacts, who have full-time jobs on board, and have a contract for various things. I know a woman who works for an agency who said, yeah, you can work remotely. I know another one who works in the finance end of an insurance business, and they say, yeah, you can work remotely. They don't care.
Very cool. So, you know, you've had some awesome experience to live aboard and actually not have the money to just be, you know, free to do whatever you want, but that actually, you know, have had to figure out, oh, if we want to take off, we got to build up the cruising kitty, as it's often referred to, where you can take off and wander for a while and then come back and refill that. What do you say to people who are at a point where they're thinking, oh, you know, I want to do this, but I don't know if I should or not?
I don't know if they should either. One of the things that happened when we first moved aboard is a million men we knew who were sailors back in Maine would come up to Stuart and say, can you talk my wife into this? Or come up to me and say, can you talk my wife into this? One person came up and wanted to talk her husband into it, but he was really nasty about it and dragged her away from us at the party. Really not kidding. So you can't talk anybody into this. You both have to want to do this, because it's like, you really can't talk anybody into having children. I mean, you really don't want to talk or guilt, or it's a lifestyle change. They're going to take over your life. This takes over your life. You have to both really want to do it, and you have to look upon it as an adventure. So everything that happens is part of the adventure, and it's all good because and I learned to tell the funny stories, and the articles I tend to write and sell tend to have some funny parts to them. One that was not for publication because it was just too gross was about how something broke I had to deal with. But you're going to end up doing things you never expected to do. And some of them are going to be hard, and some of them are going to be just freaking annoying, and you just can't wait for it to be over. But that's what life is. One of my girlfriends said, I don't see how you do this. She said, I respect it. I'm happy you guys are happy. I don't see how you do this. And I said, I don't see how you guys had your 2 jobs and raised beautiful children and raised them so fully and involved and in such an awesome way. I could never have done that. I could never have thought of half of the things you thought of as a parent to teach your kids. And I couldn't have done it. And so you couldn't do it. So everybody has to find out what they can do. I don't think everybody should do this. I don't want everybody doing this, because then we have to pluck you out of the water and deal with you. Seriously.
Yep, no, I've heard that a few times. I've definitely heard that a few times. So, when you head out, when you headed out on your long 5-year cruise, what were you most afraid of?
I don't think I was afraid of anything beforehand. I mean, I don't remember being afraid in the abstract, except would I miss people? And I had a couple of bouts of that. Again, when we set off in the Bahamas, their phone system was horrible, and trying to get information and back home was hard, and it was a whole different ballgame than it is now. And I can remember having a meltdown too in the Bahamas because of that. But in a storm, I can remember being afraid of certain things in a storm, but before we set off to cross the Atlantic from St. Martin, I wasn't in fear at all. I was excited when we came back. I wasn't in fear. I wasn't afraid in Panama when we were crossing to Panama and the situation there. So, there were times I really didn't like the storm that came up out of nowhere, in coming down, going around Cape Fear. And all these things always happen when my husband's asleep. So everything starts when he's down below.
Of course, you're on watch.
Nothing starts when he's on deck and I'm down below. And that is absolutely true. I don't know. The timing issue is kind of screwy. But so, I have to wake him up and say, this is coming at us, or this, and early on I would wake him up more often than I should. Now I can handle things or realize it's going to be okay, but he would live through it. But yeah, no, I didn't set out in fear of anything. Awesome. When we sold our house, our neighbor said, who was, again, very supportive and didn't want to do it, he said, what if you hate it? What if you sell your house and buy this boat and you move aboard and you hate it? And I said, then when I'm 85 years old, I won't wonder what if. Then we'll sell the boat and buy another house and move on to the next thing. I mean, but what if we don't hate it? And we don't hate it.
It's very cool. So, many of the people that are going to be watching these are people that are very much at a point of, I want to change my life. Mm-hmm. I want to do something different. Sailing, not sailing. What type of advice would you give? Not necessarily somebody who wants to sail, but somebody who's looking at a situation in life where they can head down the traditional path, whatever that traditional path is, or go down a path where people may not completely understand it. It's something they want to do. What type of advice would you give them?
I wouldn't recommend going down a non-traditional path just because you don't like something about your life, or because you don't know what to do, what else to do, or things aren't working for you. And that has worked out for some people, but time and again, we are reminded, because we'll go to these, we sail into these harbors where we don't know anybody. And sometimes we don't speak the language of the people on shore. There might be somebody in the anchorage that speaks English, but there might not be. And that's okay. We learn, we deal, we cope. And for us, it's all about, for me, it's actually more about going into the harbors and going ashore, meeting the people and doing things than it is about the sailing. The sailing is how I get there. For my husband, he gets to go to the harbor and see people, meet people, but he gets to sail to it. And so one of us we're sort of like this, but we both like to do both things. It's just that one of us is motivated by the things. But to answer your question, if you're looking for something different, then because you want to do something that's not the same, or that's not what you're doing and you're not satisfied, then for heaven's sakes, try things out and look for something different, and don't worry about what other people think. If you're generally unhappy or unhappy about something right now and things are not right with your life, making a massive change may not fix them. It may not be the panacea. We were happy. We were happily married. We liked the house. We loved our kid. We loved our friends. We loved the town we were living in and the area we were in. Well, we wanted to see some part of the world, and he wanted to do it by sailing. So I wanted to see part of the world, and I could do it with sailing. So that was easy for us. I can't remember the authors. Have you talked to or heard about the people from the West Coast? They've written a book, and they are not cruisers, but so they sold their house after retirement. They said we could spend as much money living here and watching the world go by, or we could sell it and take our retirement money and Airbnb around Europe. And for 5 years, that's what they did. They Airbnb'd around Europe, coming back when they had to, because of the visa issues or whatever. that sounds like something I'd like to do if we retire from the boat. If we can't sail anymore, if it's just gets old, we could do that. Because I don't see settling down. I don't ever see, settling.
Very cool. So what's the most important thing in life?
Oh, I don't know. It depends on everybody else. For me, I guess it's being with my husband and doing what we want to do. I mean, that's it. We've been married 31, 2, 85, 33 years.
Very cool. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah, something like that. Over 30 years, whatever it is. Do the math. People talk about how small the boat is. It's a good sized boat, but we're close together. I mean, I told him 3 days ago, okay, 4:00, I had this interview. You've got to leave me alone. You got to be quiet. You can't fix anything.
Well, thank you for me.
So he had to go get something. He showed up at 4:45. I said, I have 5 minutes to help you get that aboard the boat, and then I'm done with you. You can't run the generator. You can't fix anything. There's no banging.
well, thank you for setting that up. I appreciate that.
That's the challenge of this lifestyle.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what's the biggest benefit to your life that you found in what you're doing? In the lifestyle you've chosen to live aboard, to sail, to not, have the house and the white picket fence and all of those type of things. What's the biggest benefit to you personally?
When we look back on what we've done, even when we lived on the dock, it's the people we met. And it's just the people we met. And whether they're coming into Maine to go on a cruise and they're stopping by, whether they're our neighbors. And, if you're living aboard in Maine, you're not normal for a reason. I mean, it's not a normal thing to do to live aboard in Maine over winter. So we're all a little quirky, which is fine. Some are more quirky than others, but it's the people. I mean, we sailed into Dominican Republic and to this funky weird harbor of a lot of expat sailors. And I'm walking down the street, and it's this dusty, dusty Main Street at the time. Luperon had to redo their sewer lines and the roads, and it was just horribly dusty, dirty Main Street. Lovely people. I didn't speak any Spanish, and there's this obvious grandmother holding a newborn, like a 3-week-old baby in her arms, and just, rocking outside. And at the doorway is the new mom, and she's with her 2-year-old. So it's, grandma's helping out and letting mom be. And I stopped and I admired the baby, and she hands her to me.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, I said, oh my goodness. So about 10 minutes, I rocked the baby. I give everybody a break, and I rocked the baby. And I'm like, how often does this happen? And then in the same town, we met another guy who was a very flamboyant, interesting man. He gets us invited to his cousin's house for dinner. And she's also a hairstylist, and so she cut my hair. I mean, it's just like, it's the people you meet. It's we go to a festival in the Azores, and we meet up with a guy whose family immigrated from the Azores to California. He's a mailman. He's a flippin' U.S. mailman in California, but he's brought his 90-year-old parents back to the Azores because this may be the last trip they're able to take back in the summer to stay with the family in the family home back in the Azores. And we get talking, and he joins us on this 10-hour hike the next day.
Oh, wow.
We're email friends. And we're hiking with this man who grew up on this island, whose great aunt had a house that was swept away by this earthquake. I mean, it's the people. For us, it's the people. And even the cruisers. The other cruisers are amazing. We're fast friends. And we have a strong friendships that we've developed from the cruising world that as we do from the really strong friendships we made back on land before we left.
Mm-hmm.
It's the people.
That is very, very, very cool. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time with me today to share your story. This is what
painless.
Well, maybe not for your husband. He had to go find something to do, then not make noise. So do thank him for me. But if people want to learn a little bit more about you or get a hold of you, what are the best means or methods to do that?
Okay, I do have a blog. It hasn't been as active since we've been here because it's called Harts at Sea, Harts at Sea.
Okay.
At Sea. we're kind of sitting on a mooring, and it's frankly, this is a little, to me, it's boring. Our lifestyle right now is boring, and it's not like let's do an article about fixing the boat today and going off on a hike, or a hash tomorrow.
Right.
It's like, let's fix the boat today, let's go to work tomorrow. It's boring. So, but it's there, and the past exploits are on it. There'll be more. And then you can follow me on Facebook at Barbatsea, BARBATSEA as well.
Very cool.
Sort of the theme there is, of course, the at sea.
No, that one's obvious. Cool. Well, thank you very, very much. So I always wrap up with one question.
Okay.
Because oftentimes, I know little pieces of your story before we start talking, but oftentimes there's something I missed. So what question should I have asked you?
Oh. What question should you have asked me? That's a good one. I don't think we missed anything. Yeah, I can't. Why don't I have a Maine accent?
Oh, there we go. Why don't you have a Maine accent?
I was a speech major in college, and it I have it when I see my family. I go right back to it for a week. Once I've seen them for 3 hours, it's like all over again.
You've slipped back up there, huh?
Absolutely, yeah. No, that's it. We don't speak any foreign languages. We learn as we go. It's really, if you're going to go do this, French or Spanish are probably one of the two you should learn.
Sure.
Other than that, do it.
Very, very cool. Well, thank you so much for the time today. Welcome. I greatly appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Shay. Thanks for asking. Take care. Bye-bye.